Hello there, Salim Omar here from the Straight Talk about Small Business Success podcast. I'm super excited. We've got a special guest, Rod, and myself. Rod is my co-host. Rod, hello.
Hello, Salim.
Great. And our guest is Dr. Yoram Solomon. He's the author of the Book of Trust, and he's the host of the Trust Show podcast. He's published 14 books, 22 patents, and more than 300 articles on Inc. magazine, Innovation Excellence, and more. He holds a PhD in organization management, an MBA, a law degree, and an engineering degree. He has founded several startup companies and sold one startup company in Silicon Valley. He has held various positions from general manager of a $100 million business unit in a Fortune 200 company to a vice president of corporate strategy and innovation and to CEO. He's an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship and innovation at Southern Methodist University. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Salim, and good to meet you, Rod.
So how does an engineer end up being the expert with the topic of trust?
You know, first of all, I don't like referring to myself as an expert. I consider myself a researcher, and I think you never really become an expert. You get to know more than other people, but you always research. So I'm a trust researcher. And it really started for years, decades. I spent my time on innovation and coming up with new solutions for old problems and new problems for new solutions. And you know, the more I got into the topic of innovation, the more I realized this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to help companies innovate. And I started, the name of my company is actually Innovation Culture Institute. And in 2008, I had to come up with a topic for my PhD dissertation. And if you remember 2008, the Great Recession, I worked for a large company. I worked for Texas Instruments, a company with 35,000 employees that had just announced they're going to lay off 1,400 people. They just didn't say who. Can you imagine working for a company? You spent the last 7 years with a company. They just said, we're going to lay off 1,400 people, cut costs, and we just are not telling you yet if it's you or not. So with all of this in mind, actually, the biggest thing I had on my mind was I had to come up with the topic for my PhD dissertation. And I talked to my mentor, Cordy, and I kept suggesting ideas. He set a pretty high bar for me for my topic. He said, I want you to come up with a topic that will have a big impact on your life and on the lives of others, positive impact. And so, you know, every topic I came up with, he kept knocking it down. It wasn't good enough. Nothing was good enough for him. And I was getting pretty annoyed and scared, you know, not as scared as I was of the 2008 recession or maybe my job is on the line with Texas Instruments, but that I'm never going to come up with a topic for my doctoral research. And at some point he asked me a pivotal question. That was, Salim, this was one of the most critical, pivotal questions in my professional life. He asked me, Yoram, what pisses you off? And well, I wanted to say, I'm trying to come up with the topic and you don't let me. But the words that came out of my mouth were, why are people so much more creative when they work in small startup companies than when they work in large mature companies? It was quite on the other side of the line. And he said, I think we have a topic. And that was what I researched for the next 2 years. I researched it in the entire US, Canada, China, Europe, the Middle East. I talked to entrepreneurs. I talked to people who worked in large companies. And after 2 years, it really came down to its innovation culture. And I defined what innovation culture is. And at that time, I was about to... I met who would be a potential client in the future. And I started asking them about those components of innovation culture. And it was strange because every question I asked, every good component of innovation culture, they did not have. They had all the bad ones. They did not have autonomy. They had bureaucracy. They could not hold a constructive disagreement. They hold office politics and destructive disagreements and all of that. And, you know, being a true researcher, the question that comes to mind is why? Why? I was more interested in finding the answer to why than to actually get them as a client. And the more I asked, the more I realized that it all came down to trust. Trust, 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 trust. And what I realized is if you want to help a company innovate, it's like starting to build a building from the second floor. You don't start with the second floor. The first floor is innovation culture. You don't even start with the first floor. You start by pouring a foundation, and trust is the foundation for everything. So at that time, I realized that I'm onto something here. You know, should I leave the area of innovation where I spent the last 30 years of my career? Do I leave innovation and go into trust? I asked 20 of my closest friends, what do you think? Should I leave innovation and go into trust? 19 out of 20 said, stick with innovation. So I switched to trust.
I like that. That's awesome. That's awesome. So I want to clear up one thing. You used two terms that are very important: trust, which is the topic of your life work is moved in that direction. You've used the word innovation, and I want to get a soundbite from you. Why is innovation important in a small organization? The listener of this, and he's saying, man, I'm just trying to kind of survive the day, the week. What are you talking about when it comes to innovation? I'm not a $500 million company. I'm a $1 million company or a $5 million company.
Well, funny that you asked that. It's a great question, and I'm going to take a detour here and talk about what I teach at SMU, because I teach entrepreneurship. I teach entrepreneurship at the graduate level, and I tell them this: innovation is what creates differentiation. Okay, innovation is what creates differentiation. If you want to be successful as a new business, you cannot do the same thing that everybody else is doing. You have to do something different. And the only way to get to something different is by innovation. So first of all, innovation gives you differentiation. Now, it's not enough to do something different. You need to be able to protect your innovation. And you do that through competitive advantage. And there are different types of competitive advantages. So you wanted a soundbite, Salim. So here's your soundbite.
Yeah, that's great. Innovation, that's awesome.
Yeah. Innovation opens the door to the market. Competitive advantage closes the door behind you and doesn't let your competitors in.
Love that.
That's true forget $1 million business. That's true for a $10,000 business. Nobody is going to buy from you if you're tiny and you have exactly the same thing that the big guys have. You have to have something different with value.
So let's talk about trust. What can entrepreneurs do to foster creativity and leadership in their teams while keeping a focus on the company's mission?
Well, you asked an interesting question. You said, let's talk about trust. What can entrepreneurs do to foster leadership and creativity? Here's where it is. You don't get creativity when you don't have trust. You don't get good leadership if you don't have trust. Here's a funny thing. Let's start. I'll touch on leadership first. I did a survey and I asked people, what is the most important quality for you in other people? I'm not going to go through the entire set of findings that I found, but number one was trustworthiness. Now, I asked about 6 types of people. 61.2% on average said trustworthiness is the most important quality in other people. And this is, we're talking 363 people. I gave them 6 types of people: your boss, your employees, your peers, colleagues, a salesperson trying to sell you something, a product or a service, your government representative, or your spouse. Now, I already told you 61.2% said trustworthiness is the most important quality on average on all these 6 people. But if I start breaking it down, I want to touch on the highest and the lowest. The highest one, salespeople. I don't know you. You're trying to sell me something. You're an entrepreneur. Most likely, your next customer is someone who doesn't know you. You know how important trustworthiness is in you for them? 77.4%. That's the highest. 3 or 4 people, when you're a new business trying to sell something to what's a new customer for you, the number one, 3 out of 4, when you ask them what's most important quality in you, they're going to say trustworthiness. And I'll give you another story in a second. But let's talk about leadership. Out of the 6 types of people, I gave you 6 types of relationships. Trustworthiness was the most important one in only 5 of them. Not in all 6, in only 5 of them. You want to know which one it wasn't?
Yeah.
Leaders. When I asked leaders about their followers, what is the most important to you, the leader, in your follower? Only 39% said trustworthiness. 48% said willingness to work hard. It's more important for leaders that their employees are willing to work hard than their trustworthiness, then they can trust them. This is what I call the leadership failure today. And this is 2022. And I asked this question ever since 2017. And this is consistently always the answer. Number 1, willingness to work hard. This brings something that Henry Ford said once. He said that, why is it that every time I ask for a pair of hands, they come with a brain attached? Leaders, they just want people to work hard. They don't want to be able to trust them. So what makes you a good leader? Your willingness to trust your employees and to show them that you're willing to trust them. Over the last 14 years, I observed the 8 laws of trust. And trust law number 6 is that trust is reciprocal. It's not only that if you are trustworthy, then I will trust you because you earned my trust. It's if I trust you and I show you that I trust you, you will behave in a trustworthy way, because otherwise it just feels weird. But let's talk about you as the entrepreneur. You want to sell a product. You want to sell a service. I already told you 77.4% of your new customers will tell you that the number 1 quality in you is trustworthiness. I wanted to see if people are willing to put their money where their mouth is. So I suggested, here's a $10,000 project. Maybe it's a home renovation project or whatever. It's a $10,000 project. And you do your research and you bring in 2 companies. They come in. One of them, he owns the business. He's the owner of the business. He's been in business for 20 years, has good reviews, but most important, he shows you that he cares about what you get out of this project. He shows you that it's not about the money for him. It's about you being happy with the result. In other words, in 20 minutes, he shows you that he's trustworthy. Okay. Another one comes in. He comes in, you can tell in the first 2 minutes that 3 months ago, he was a used car salesman. 3 months from now, he's going to go back to be a used car salesman, and he's treating you just like one transaction. All I want to do is I want to get the deal done, get my commission, and I don't care about you. In other words, in 20 minutes, he establishes himself as being untrustworthy. Both of them send you quotes. I'm actually right now in that situation where I want to do pool renovation and I'm waiting for 2 quotes. Both of them send you the quotes. Both of them come for exactly the same price, $10,000. Which one would you choose? The trustworthy one or the other one?
Obviously, the trustworthy one.
100% of the people I asked would choose the trust. What if the trustworthy salesperson asks 10% higher price? 11,000 instead of 10,000. Who are you going to choose? The trustworthy one at 11,000 or the cheaper one at 10,000? That's not trustworthy.
Trustworthy one. Fee price is elastic.
Yeah.
100% of the people I asked gave me the same answer. How about 20% higher price? I'll share with you. At 20% higher price, 56% said they're going to still go with the trustworthy sales one. 36% said that we're not sure. We're still going to think between them, but we're not sure. I asked about 50% higher price, and I still had something like 22% said we're going to go with the trustworthy salesperson at 50% higher price. Now, there are several factors that come into play. One is, what does $10,000 or $15,000 represent in your total budget or your total income? Obviously, the higher it is, the more sensitive you are to the price. The second part is How is this going to be a long-term relationship? If it's a long-term relationship, then I care a little more about trust than I do about the price. Is it something that's manageable? What are the consequences of doing the job wrong? Let's take a $10,000 project and say one project is we're going to paint your wall. Okay. What's the worst thing that can happen if you do a bad job? We're going to have somebody else paint over it and the problem gone, right? What if the project is surgery, brain surgery on your child? Bigger consequences, right?
Correct.
So the bigger the consequences, the more important trustworthiness is. But the bottom line is, putting it all into a formula, on average, a trustworthy entrepreneur can sell the same product and the same service for 29.6% higher price and still get the business. This is how important trust is.
Yeah. Rod, questions? You want to jump in? What are you thinking?
Sure. I've been thinking about, this is, it talks, and we've talked about entrepreneurs. How do entrepreneurs really take that creativity and innovation and help their team basically turn that into production, but keeping them on mission? Because innovation and creation without a goal is just chaos. So I'm not sure.
Well, since I spent the last 14 years focusing on trust, my answer is going to have to start with, it's all about trust, right? But let me tell you, I'll give you an example. One of the things that I found was that to be creative. So this is, now we're going back 14 years to my PhD research on innovation, right? And what I found was that one of the strongest factors on innovation was the team dynamics. And the team dynamics really correlates to the ability to hold what I call a constructive disagreement. This is where, we can argue, we can passionately argue, but it's not personal. It's not emotional. I mean, it's passion, but it's not emotional. It's not irrational. So, the flip side of it, by the way, is on one hand, the destructive disagreement. And this is where everything is personal. And this is where I'm not going to say some of the things. There's the other side, and this is the politically correct disagreement. This is when we have the meeting before the meeting after the meeting, just not the meeting during the meeting. Okay? And so
True.
This is when things get closed outside of the doors, And so in a high trust environment, what I found was that, let me do it the other way around. In a low trust environment, people are 10 times, Rod, more likely to say, I try to avoid disagreement altogether. Disagreements are not productive, and I don't feel comfortable when I disagree. 10 times more than in a high trust environment. So, what is it that we need to do to be able to be creative? Well, we need to be vulnerable. I need to be willing to ask you, Rod, stupid questions and suggest stupid ideas and not worry about what you're going to do with them, Rod. That you're going to go to Salim behind my back and say, oh, did you hear that stupid question that Yoram said? And then you're going to tell other people. No, I need to be willing to be vulnerable. My willingness to be vulnerable is 240% higher in high trust environments than in low trust environment. I need to be willing to give you a no BS, direct, unfiltered, no sugarcoating feedback on what you said without having to worry about how you're going to take that feedback. In a high trust environment, I'm 106% more likely to give you that kind of feedback than in low trust environment. And finally, I need to be receptive to that kind of feedback coming from you. Rod, you need to feel comfortable giving me that kind of feedback. No BS feedback. Tell me what you really think. I need to be receptive to that. And in a high trust environment, I'm 76% more receptive to that kind of feedback than in low trust environment, where I'm going to say, no, he's saying this just to hurt me. This is not what he really means. So these are the components that make for a constructive disagreement. Constructive disagreement is what makes creativity. Now, you said mission and vision, a unifying mission and vision. Well, this is not at the team level. This is at the vertical level. This is the company to its employees. So do you have a mission statement that makes sense? I worked with an entrepreneurial group, and they were in the electronic manufacturing. It was an electronic manufacturing group. And I worked with them on come up with a mission statement. And their mission statement was, we are going to be the best producer for the best customers and the leading and so on. I'm sorry, this is motherhood and apple pie. This is too obvious. So I actually, one of the articles, Salim, you talked about me writing articles for Inc. magazine, among others. I think more than 160. I used to have my own column on, I'm trying to remember the name of the column. It was something like unintentional creativity, something like that. But one of the articles talked about the mission statement. And I said, here is my test for a mission statement. This is your mission statement. Say the opposite. What's the opposite of the mission statement? Well, so I asked them, what's the opposite of your mission statement? We want to be the worst producer for the smallest number of customers. We want to come in last and not first. Well, that sounds kind of stupid, right? Well, if it sounds stupid, then the original is meaningless. A strong mission statement that gets everybody Rod to feel that they're on the same side and everybody else is the enemy and they're on the outside and we're going to beat them, is a mission statement that's not stupid, that's not obvious, that's not meaningless. So a mission statement like, we're going to offer top-tier service to those that top-tier manufacturers don't want to serve. Because what we found was, for example, that the two dimensions of their market was volume and quality. And so you had the big manufacturers, all the Sanminas and Flextronics, they were high quality, but they would only touch you if you have high volume. Then you had all the offshore manufacturers that had low volume, high volume, doesn't matter, but low quality. Nobody occupied that box that said high quality, low volume. And I said, you are doing a great job at that box. Why don't you focus on that job and make your mission statement? We're going to offer top tier quality to those that top tier manufacturers don't want to serve. When you hear something like this as an employee, you go, I know what our mission is. And our mission is not stupid. It's not meaningless. There is meaning in this mission. And that kind of mission statement makes employees feel that they're on the same side and that everybody else is on the other side. All the competitors are on the other side. That's when you build trust in that team.
Man, love it. That's awesome. Good stuff, man.
As you can see, I'm not very passionate about the topic.
Yeah, no, love your energy, man. It comes through very clearly. And yeah, this is great. You've shared lots of gems. And I'm looking at the clock as well. And, we want to finish off in the next few minutes. Yoram, unpack for us, how does trust show up? You gave the example of the contractor, the $10,000 project. Give us a couple of elements of how trust is going to show up with the person who is going to build the trust in that scenario. And then perhaps a couple of examples of how trust shows up day to day, a couple of things in a small business. Yeah.
So what you're seeing right now, instead of my lovely face, was the model. This was my model that I covered in the Book of Trust and other books, obviously. So I'm going to give you just the 6 components of what makes a person, an entity, a company trusted by others. They're broken into 2 groups. One is the who you are, and this is what I know about you before I ever met you personally. And the other 3 components, this is the what you do whenever we interact. So the who you are, competence, how competent are you in what you do? Personality compatibility. This is where I need to say that we think of trust as something that's universal and absolute. It is not. It is not. Salim, the same thing that I might do the same thing that would earn me Rod's trust and not yours. And I can do the same thing that would earn me your trust and not Rod's. Trust is relative. So the second component is personality compatibility. And you have to upfront give up on, you're not going to be trusted by all people. You want to be trusted by the people you want to be trusted by. And that's personality compatibility. The third one is symmetry and fairness. And for example, one component of symmetry, Rod, to your question before, is having a strong mission statement that gets everybody to feel they're on the same side. By the way, what does the opposite? Internal competition. Hey, of the two of you, one of you is going to get a promotion after this project is over. Guess what? You two are no longer on the same side. You two are on opposite sides because one of you is going to get the promotion. This is the who you are. The what you do, how do you interact? And the first is, are you positive when you interact? And I have a very strict definition to what positivity is. It's made of two components. One of them is the level of BS that you bring to the interaction. And I know we bring BS and we think the other person doesn't know. The other person knows that what you bring is BS. We were born with BS detectors. That's one. The other is empathy. How much do you care about me? How much do you care to put yourself to see things from my perspective as if you are me? Because we're not in the same place. There are no two people out of 7-point-something billion people on this planet. No two people are at the same place in life. So how willing are you to put yourself on my side and see things from my perspective? So this is the positivity part. It is accelerated. It is accelerated by one, the amount of time that you spend with your customer or anybody. How much time do we spend? How frequently do we meet? Do I show up on time? And the last one is intimacy. This is why I always like to, even if my client is really far away, I always prefer to have a face-to-face, even over Zoom, to have a face-to-face interaction with them. So many people today just resort to sending text messages, email messages. That does not build intimacy. It does not build trust. So the 6 components, the who you are, competence, personality, compatibility, and symmetry, the 3 components of what you do, positivity, time, and intimacy.
Wow, great. Very good, Yoram. This has been amazing. Any final words of wisdom? And I know there's lots of them coming from you with everything you've accomplished. Very impressive. Your bio is super impressive. I did comment on that, but I mean, it's as impressive as it can be. Final words of wisdom.
I want to give you 2. One is that trust takes a group of highly creative and productive individuals and turns them into a creative and productive team. You can't do that without trust. The second one is more on the individual level. I want you to consider, and I want all of your listeners to consider, that the answer to this question will have the biggest impact on your personal and professional success or failure. Can I trust you? That's what I have for you.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Yoram. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. And if you need more, you already know about the Book of Trust, my podcast, The Trust Show. Oh, Trust Habits is actually my workshop, or my website, trusthabits.com or yoramsolomon.com.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. And we'll get that all in our show notes as well. So awesome. Good stuff, man.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the day, the week, the year. Oh, you know what? I'll ask you one more thing, and not ask you, I'll wish you one more thing. We're still at the beginning of 2022. So I wish that 2022 for you is going to be better than any year you had before and worse than any year you're going to have in the future.
That's awesome. Thank you, man.